But let's start with the trade deadline. I'm going to run through first here all the players who are
100 trades.
Yeah, right. Big news yesterday was Marshon Lattimore, obviously going from the Saints to the Commanders. We'll discuss that. That was for a 3, a 4, and a 6. They got a 5 back. We know Devontae Adams to the Jets, DeAndre Hopkins to the Chiefs, Amari Cooper to the Bills, Deontay Johnson to the Ravens. Those were all known. Mike Williams to the Steelers, though, for a 5th.
Love that.
Preston Smith to the Steelers from the Packers for a 7th.
Need that.
Za'Darius Smith, we talked about earlier this week, going from Cleveland to Detroit. Khalil Davis goes to San Francisco. Little backup defensive tackle there for them. Jonathan Mingo, the second-round wide receiver last year for the Carolina Panthers, goes to the Dallas Cowboys for a 4th. They get a 7th back, though. A little pick swap there. Josh Uche, obviously, to the Chiefs. Cam Robinson to the Vikings. Tre'Davious White goes from the Rams to the Ravens.
That will be an interesting one.
And one of the craziest trade compensations I've ever seen. They got a 2026 7th-round pick in return, and they gave away a 2027 7th-round pick. They basically just said, here, you can have Tre'Davious White.
There was talks, right, that he wanted to be released, and they were going to grant him, but they were like, if we can get a little something. So, I mean, they gained a pick, what is it, in 2026, but in 2027.
Up 2026, their 7th rounder in a couple years. Baron Browning to the Cardinals. We talked about that one earlier in the week. Cam Akers to the Vikings. Khalil Herbert goes from Chicago, where he had kind of fallen out of favor in that running back.
That one's sneaky good.
It is.
To the Cincinnati Bengals.
Zach Moss being banged up.
Yeah.
Ernest Jones went to the Seahawks. Roy Robertson-Harris to the Seahawks. And then Jerome Baker to the Titans. All those happened earlier.
The Ernest Jones one is kind of funny because we were talking earlier this season, could potentially a guy like Hassan Reddick be traded twice? Ernest Jones was traded twice within a couple of weeks. Like I don't think I've ever seen that in the NFL
coach
season.
Get fired in 11 months twice. We saw multiple guys get moved.
NFL, not for long. And Ernest Jones was not really.
Their wives are not happy.
He's a good player. He's a good player. Like, it's just weird that he got traded twice.
A pretty good deal this offseason. He was a good player for Tennessee. So all interesting moves there. What to you guys was the biggest surprise that we saw?
I don't know about biggest surprise, but I really like the move for the Steelers to go get Mike Williams. We talked about having a guy like George Pickens, who's obviously going to give you a chance to win every time he goes on the field, but we don't know if he's going to show up and be that guy and have that competitive nature, that competitive edge that we've seen the last 2 outings with Russell Wilson. Throw a guy like Mike Williams in there, another target that's reliable for Russell. To be able to get the ball to. And you could be looking at a Steelers offense who gets a little bit better. I really like that. The Khalil Herbert move to Cincinnati, you talked about the injury situation there. Khalil Herbert, a guy who had a ton of volume in Chicago in the last handful of years. He hasn't been featured as such this year in Shane Waldron's system for whatever reason. I still think he's got a lot of juice in the tank. He's a guy that can get you a lot of carries a game, a lot of yards after contact. So he's a smart runner, a tough runner. I think that fits in well with that group there. The Mingo one leaves me scratching my head. Not only for what you get, but why you're even getting guys right now, and also what you gave up to get him.
Man,
head scratcher there.
I was going to say, from a standpoint of head scratching, definitely the Mingo one, because you gave up a 4th. I know Mike alluded to them getting a 7th back, and supposedly Jerry and his staff were extremely high on Mingo when he was coming out. But it's just like, what have you seen on the field, that film that makes you want to jump up? I mean, this dude was like receiver 4 in Carolina, right? Their number 1 receiver, Deontay Johnson, didn't even get it. It was essentially a pick swap that he got traded for. So for you to give up a 4th, especially when we were literally just having this conversation yesterday when the news, or Monday when the news came out about Dak Prescott's hamstring and how the season most likely is going to be a wash. When you look at their players that are getting a bulk of the cap money, it's CeeDee Lamb and Dak, right? So you need to find cheap labor. So you giving away a 4th-round pick is hurting you in the future. You need more draft picks to actually hit. So, like, you can't be giving away those assets just willy-nilly.
Star-laden roster. And when something happens to one of those stars, or God forbid, one of the guys who isn't a star goes down, now you got a less than good guy option out there.
Correct.
You need to be able to fill in that depth with the star roster. You can use that 4th-round pick.
You would think so.
Yeah. But to your point about they liked him, coming out for the draft, I understand that. And I understand that coaches have a hubris and a confidence and ego involved with being a coach. So they think
GMs and front office.
I'm going to be the guy that brings him back to
Did we have this conversation too?
I don't even think we did, but this is a conversation that's had in locker room.
It's like the outlier thing, right? Like, I'm going to change him.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to be the guy to, no, you're not. Like, he's the rule. He's not the exception. And I love Jonathan Mingo. I loved him coming out as well. But like things I've seen, because I've been able to see Carolina's Panthers training camp practice the last 2 years because they've cross practice with the Jets. And it's just like the consistency with his hands. He has concentration drops all the time. Again, looks great coming off the bus. He's like prototypical, this is what I want my X receiver to be. Just hasn't, accumulated on the field consistently enough.
And the team that knows him best, Carolina Panthers, they were phasing him out of the offense. Right?
Correct.
Like they were cutting his snaps down in recent weeks. He had fallen completely out of favor, getting passed by a UDFA rookie and Jalen Coker. It's like,
who's been cooking lately, too.
Yeah. I'm a fan of his. I actually had very similar grades on him and Mingo coming out. I had them both at the back end of my top 100. I just thought, Mingo, you get the evidence in the NFL. You can't ignore that. And I think they're just ignoring that we saw what he was in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And you would take pretty much any fourth round, even just wide receiver in most classes over what we've seen from Mingo at this point. So, man, I didn't get that move whatsoever from the Dallas Cowboys. The one I think was my favorite, if we're talking about like under the radar moves, Baron Browning to Arizona.
Okay, so that was a head scratcher for me from the Broncos standpoint.
Yes, well, I think
I love it for Arizona though.
I wonder if he was upset there.
Obviously,
yes. I mean, it had to be, right? I think a lot of these moves are a lot of times
disgruntled
spurred by
Correct.
guys like, hey, if they're not going to be happy where they are, and he wasn't, he was kind of third in that pecking order. And you just paid Jonathan Cooper at the same time. They were both hitting free agency the same season, so I get why he'd be upset. But he's good. Like the guy can legitimately rush the passer.
Really good pass, and not just rushing the passer. Like I went back to watch that Jets game probably like 2 weeks ago versus the Denver Broncos. I was preparing for the Ravens game, and I'm like, the way he sets the vertical edge, the physicality at the line. Like I think is Nick Bonito can get to the quarterback, but he's not the best at setting the edge.
Yes.
My thing is, why would you want to lose a young player like Baron Browning who has that type of grit and attitude that brings that to the defense? Now, they did get John Franklin Myers, and he'll probably take up a lot of that slack, and he has done that this year. So maybe that's what they were thinking, Mike. Like, we already got a guy like John Franklin Myers. We kind of already restructured and gave him a little bit more money. He's going to be part of our future plans, at least for the next 2 years. Let's go ahead and see what we can get for Baron Browning. Again, I love it from Arizona. As a Jet ex-player and fan, I hate it because he's going to play the Jets, and he killed them when they played earlier this year versus the Denver Broncos, and now he's in Arizona getting ready to play the Jets this year.
And I think from Arizona's perspective, he could legitimately be part of their long-term plans. Like, he could be part of the answer there because this is a guy who, coming out of Ohio State, played off-ball linebacker.
Yep.
He was never a pass rusher. Even his very first year with the Denver Broncos was an off-ball linebacker. So he's only in his third season actually rushing the passer, was a freak athlete coming out. And the improvement you saw 2022, 2023, and now he's been banged up this year early on and only just got back healthy. But, man, I can't believe he went for as little as he did, considering that.
So that was, I don't know if you saw, but that was my surprise. I was surprised Denver let him go for as little as they did. And one, like, why would you do that when you're in the hunt right now? Again, everybody knows you need 3 serviceable rushers on the outside. I mean, look at the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
Nick Herbig is a hell of a player, but he's hurt right now. All right, we're going to go get Preston Smith. So now they got 4 guys.
TJ could be hurt next week.
Yeah, I mean, Heisman's coming off injury. So they're like, you need as many rushers as you can have. And if you're Sean Payton and you really feel like this team could maybe be sneaky and get in as a 6th, 7th
bodies, bodies.
You got to have 100% bodies, right? Like I didn't understand why they let Baron Browning go.
The move that I really loved and I thought was an absolute necessity, though, Mike, was the Detroit Lions going against Za'Darius Smith.
And you think that's the biggest impact?
I think it was the most necessary one.
Okay.
Besides Lattimore, I would say.
I would say, do you think it's more impactful than Lattimore? Like, which one would you say is the biggest actual singular impact?
Man, I just think that it's not only is it a needs fit for the Lions, but it's a culture fit. And, when you listen to Dan Campbell talking about how he goes about acquiring talent, I heard him talking about David Montgomery and when he played against David Montgomery when he was a Chicago Bear. And he said, that's a guy that I would love to have on my team. And I was talking to Rick Spielman yesterday. I was like, how often are these guys upstairs having those conversations immediately after the game where it's like, I want to have that guy on my team? And he said it happens every game.
I bet.
So when you think about bringing a guy into the fold in Detroit, and I know it's Aaron Glenn's guy now, he's on defense, but He's a Dan Campbell guy. Za'Darius Smith can get after the quarterback, but the most impressive thing that I've seen from Za'Darius Smith, having played against the guy, is that he relishes the opportunity to play against the run as well.
Yeah,
to earn
great
the
against
respect
the
of
run.
his teammates.
Yep.
So he's a real glass eater, a culture fit there. I do think they would benefit from trying to, obviously getting healthy on the other side of the line of scrimmage there at the other defensive end position. But he's an immediate upgrade. He's something that you need. It now allows Aaron Glenn to mess with protection. He can bring pressure from one side, force the one-on-ones with Za'Darius Smith. You can see some of that A-gap stuff coming into play there now with Za'Darius. You're going to have one-on-ones, a lot of opportunities to run the two-man games. You get the center occupied elsewhere,
sure.
And now it's just the guard and the tackle. So that's where I think that the Lions are going to make hay. It was a necessity, and they made it happen. I'm happy for that.
The interesting thing is, I heard they called on Carl Granderson too after the Smith trade.
Yeah.
They are at defensive end, right? They have a depth issue, right? The good thing about Za'Darius, he's so versatile as well. Like you can line him up inside and get him over the guard. Ali McNeil's played really well. That's essentially why they paid him a boatload of money as well. So just imagine him and Ali McNeil inside on third down packages, right? That's why I think if they would have gotten a guy like Carl Granderson, it would have been really great to have that three-headed monster on passing downs. Yeah. Put Granderson outside, Smith inside with Aleem McNeil. You're cooking now. And, Aaron Glenn by trade likes to bring extra people to the party. He likes to bring pressure, right? He feels like he finally has a secondary now that can hold up in man coverage. So he doesn't mind putting, those guys, Carlton Davis on an island, right? He's been really good for them this year. So I love the pick for Za'Darius Smith. I honestly thought Carl Granderson or even Azeez Ojulari added too would have made so much more sense. To me, if the Lions would have been like all the way in, like we get Smith, let's go get Ojulari as well.
Pass rush juice.
Oh man, but I heard the Giants were
expensive.
Looking for third or fourth round.
He was expensive.
I mean, a fourth round pick, I might have would have gave up a fourth round for Ojulari.
Well, how bad do you want a Super Bowl?
That's what I'm saying.
Like, if you're the Chiefs, are you selling the house to get your three-peat? If you're the Lions, are you willing to go in and put that farm on the line to be able to get it? I think the answer is yes. They made a big move there. Was Za'Darius Smith, but to your point, there were some pieces on the table at the end of the trade deadline.
I have to agree that I think Marshon Lattimore is the single biggest impact in this, just because of where the Commanders are, where their weaknesses lie, and also in the division they play in. Because you look at their cornerback group, you have Mike Sainer still playing awesome for a rookie. I think he's the guy who sticks in that starting lineup. And Marshon Lattimore is replacing Benjamin St-Juste. I think St-Juste was just too boom or bust when you watched him on tape.
Forbes struggled too.
And Emmanuel Forbes, it's like at this point, I think the writing's on the wall for him. That was just not the right pick when they made it. So he replaces that other side. And in that division, a guy that can go toe-to-toe with A.J. Brown is so huge for them. And we're going to see that, I think, in a couple of weeks here. That it's like that matchup specifically is going to be huge because we've seen it over the years, Lattimore and Mike Evans. Like he's a physical outside press corner that can match up with those guys that you didn't have, right? You did not have that before.
And he gives them teeth on the back end.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Straight
like
dog.
I think about some of the matchups that are my favorite involving Marshon Lattimore, and it's always Mike Evans, right? It's always the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints. Well, let's go figure out what the new rivalry is going to be. Let's go create some beef. We know that the offense in Washington has teeth. The defense has been punching up, doing a really good job all year. They've been playing on the same page, but you get that coverage element in the back end, and somebody with the attitude that Lattimore has, I think he can give this defense a big boost. But I still think the Lions move was a necessity, and I think the Lions are going to play in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, and this just solidifies my opinion.
The Lattimore thing, though, it would be interesting, right? Because to your point, Mike, Sanders, they've kind of moved him to the outside, which he didn't do in college. He was a slot guy. And he's had some struggles. He's played really well for a guy that hasn't played on the outside as much. I wonder, though, because Quan Martin is such a good piece for them, a versatile piece. He plays in the slot, plays safety as well. Will they, because St-Juste has struggled at time, will they, because of his length, still keep him outside and maybe move Sanders still back inside? That'll be the interesting thing.
I doubt it. I think Sanders still been more reliable than I just think at this point, St-Juste, he's so to compare, 7th most yards of any cornerback in the NFL allowed this season, 441 according to PFF. Marshon Lattimore this season, 83. So that's about as big enough.
Oh yeah, for sure. I just feel like you're not maximizing Sanders. That's the only.
You got guys out of position.
Yeah, but I mean, Quan Martin is a great slot corner too. But then you move him from safety, so now you got to avoid at safety because you're moving him to the slot. So I mean, again, we talked about this earlier with the rushers, right? you got to keep throwing darts at the board, right? You got to have as much depth as possible because you never know who's going to get banged up.
You get a hamstring on a go route. Next thing you know, you're back to your
back in there.
Yeah,
you're back in there.
It was an eventful deadline for sure. And yeah, I do think the Commanders, that move specifically, I think, and the move the Detroit Lions made, I think those now.
That's a Super Bowl move.
That's a
Super Bowl move on both of the teams'
and
parts.
Just to also say, like, it can pay dividends year 2, year 3. This isn't a lot of these are 3 months rentals. Yeah. Like this guy's here for the
Lattimore going to be
like
there.
What Pittsburgh did. Those guys are here for 3 months. They're gone this offseason. Lattimore can be there next 2 years. Really.
Correct.
$18 million cap hits the next 2 seasons. That's a small price to pay for his level of performance and a team that has a rookie quarterback.
What was the spin move rusher that played at the beginning of my career, and he was at defensive end, Colts?
Freeney?
Dwight Freeney.
Oh,
Dwight Freeney used to get hired for these contract.
Oh yeah,
it's like
he's a hired mercenary.
You would see him in New Jersey in December and be like, "Here he goes! He'll get 2 sacks today." It's not one of those situations. It's like get him into the fold.
Well, and that's another thing too. When you look at their secondary, a lot of youth. They needed a veteran presence in that room. Marshon Lattimore is 29. Still playing at a high level. You don't think a guy like St. Jude's or Emmanuel Forbes or Mike Sanders still could learn from him? Quan Martin, who plays in the slot and at safety as well, can learn from him. I think they needed a true vet. I mean, Chin's been around for a while, but he's more of a weapon X. They use him at linebacker. They use him at safety. I think having a guy like Marshon Lattimore makes sense. I didn't get to my under-the-radar acquisition. Okay. Khalil Davis, I really loved it. The San Francisco, going from the Houston Texans to San Francisco, essentially playing in the same exact system, right? So it's not like he's going to miss a beat. And when you look at that, Kevin Givens is kind of banged up right now. Hey, they lost Hargrave earlier this year, so depth is an issue there. So I think he can come in and make an immediate impact. And that's the good thing when, you know, the defensive coordinator leaves and goes to the Houston Texans. Now you have a friend, right? You can reach out. Hey,
it's a satellite organization.
Hey, Khalil Davis, what would it take for him to come over here?
San Francisco 49ers colony in Houston.
Exactly. So I think that's under the radar, especially now with Christian McCaffrey coming back. And we know San Fran always makes these runs in late November, December, January. I think adding to that defensive line was big.
Who gets better when you plug in a guy that's ready to go at defensive tackle? That's an immediate upgrade. Your rushers get better on the edge. Your linebackers get a cleaner image of what the inside and mid zone is going to look like. Fred Warner is going to be able to play more confidently and quickly. That's exactly what you want. So to your point, that's a great move there.